Hello and welcome back. We're now on our final session of day two. It's been absolutely inspirational again listening to many of our talkers today, and we've so much to take away. It's just my head is bursting with ideas and just so much positivity and just real actions that we can all take as growers, as advocates for organic food, anywhere you stand in this realm, as farmers. So our final talk is Jim Cronin, again a really, really well-known horticulturalist, grower, educator. He farms in Killaloe, County Clare, sells in that area and also in Limerick City. And he's going to take us through a talk he's designed around building and maintaining soil health. So welcome, Jim. I know we've held you off. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, and you're all very welcome. We've kind of dwindling room here now, but that doesn't really matter. I want to say thanks to Sean for having me on again this year. So it's nice to be here. And I'm kind of blown away by the last speaker. And just by what he said and that type of thing. So bear with me now for a while, okay? So my talk is building and maintaining soil health, okay? So the very first thing I have a little bit of, not here in the moment, but in the next few days, I have a bit of homework for you. I want a bit of homework, because all these people coming in from all over the world, we have to see them in context of Ireland. We have to get it in context. And the yields and everything about it, we have to have it in context. Okay, but it's very interesting stuff, you know. So here's the little bit of homework, okay? So building and maintaining soil health. So the first thing is that your soil, your farm reads like a storybook. It has a story to tell, and you can begin your first page on your storybook today or when you go home. And so think of it in that context. Okay, and we'll keep it really simple now. We could have it very, very complex, but we'll keep it really simple. Okay, and in the storybook, I want you on the first page of your notebook to look at this and to say, okay, I want to understand my farm, I want to understand it historically, and I want to understand it geographically. I want a picture about my farm. So what I want you to tell me, or what I want you to write in your book, is I want you to write the underlying rock. So I'm looking at some people here in the audience, and you know, I can identify clearly a man from Jerry Brown from Roscommon, and I can say limestone country. So I want you to say, what is the underlying rock? What is the pH of that rock? And what relationship it has with calcium? So that's what I want you to say. Also with magnesium and with other nutrients. But I want you to put that down very carefully in your notebook, okay? Then the next thing I want you to determine is the soil type. And you know, it was alluded here in the last few days, you can go into various Teagasc websites and you can look at the soil type map of Ireland, and you can write in the soil type, and most people know what their own soil type is. So you don't have to be precise, you don't have to be exact, you don't have to be anything, but let's have the soil type, okay? Then the next thing that I want you to do is I want you to say what the pH potential of your farm is. And what I mean by that is that in every single farm and every single region in Ireland, the farm has a pH potential given the geological aspect of it. So if we this evening now were standing in Loch Bora on the black soil, and underneath Loch Bora, not the bog, but in the surrounding areas, if we were standing there on a farm in Loch Bora this evening, there's about 2-3 feet of lovely black soil, and underneath is a limestone gravel. And the limestone gravel underneath Loch Bora from whenever, from the Ice Age, has a potential of around 7. Now, the pH above and top might be different because of our farming practices over the last number of years. So, but I want to know the potential, because that informs your future soil health, okay? The next thing I want to know is I want you to write in the generational farming method. So I want you to say how your parents, how your grandparents, how your aunts and uncles, whoever was on the farm before you, how they farmed. So how did they farm? I'd love you to write in that they had a workhorse. But what I want you to say is how they farmed. So for instance, if we were around the sugar beet growing areas this evening, what you would say to me is, my father grew sugar beet for Carlow. My father grew sugar beet for Tuam, for the factory. That's just an example. If we were over around the Thai, they'd say there's a fantastic milling industry in Athy. We always grew grain in Athy, and we're tillage farmers. That's what we are, us Athy people. I've heard the Athy people speak about themselves that way, quite proudly, you know. So I want you to put that down, because for one thing, that will inform the weed seed bank that will come if you mess up your soil. So if you abuse your soil, so if you're around Clare Galway, you're around Tuam, and you abuse your soil with a steel implement in the soil, or by overgrazing and by making the animals poach your land, the weed that will come is red shank or fat hen. And that weed seed has been dormant in the grassland of Tuam for the last 40 years, and it only came now because of abuse. With all due respects to the red shank, what it's trying to do is repair the land. That's what it's trying to do. It has suddenly germinated, and it's saying, hey, I need to protect this ground. Okay, so so the generational farming method. Then I don't like throwing out the concept of a soil test by any means. It's a very good information source. So what a soil test would reveal. So it's very interesting to have. It's a bit like reading a bus timetable, or a bit like reading the newspaper or whatever when you're kind of nerdy. Because what you can do is you can have even take a couple of soil tests, and you could take one from one farm, and you could take one from a second farm, and you could lay it out, and you could look and say, oh yeah, look at this is interesting, that's what's happening there, you know, all that kind of thing. So I have 2 bits of land. I have a bit of land at home, then 4 or 5 miles away I have an outside bit of ground that I rent, 9 acres, and the soil type is very different in both places, but also the soil test from both areas read very differently. So the outside bit of land that I'm renting is low in magnesium, and the land that I have at home is marginal hill land, but it happens to be high in magnesium. And that's invaluable for me to know that in my whole soil building program, to know what the soil test would reveal. You know, the one at home, Elaine Ingham alluded to it yesterday, the one at home will read high iron, and you see what high iron does. So it's all very important stuff. And then the other thing, the last thing then in my little essay or whatever, is the farmer knowledge of the land. So when I rented that bit of ground 4 years ago, and I came inside the gate, the very first thing, this man walked down the road. He was about 80 years of age, and he said, do you see those 2 acres there? They were always good for spuds. But the thing about them is that we always had to be careful to put on that, what was that mineral that we had to put on, that if we didn't put it on, our turnips would rot. What was it? He said. So there I was, like, that's only just one conversation I had with one neighbour about his knowledge of the land. And sure, what he was alluding to was boron. You know, so he saved me a lot of headache by knowing that this land was deficient in boron. And there was a lot more that they told me. And when I went to that place and I dug my soil and all that kind of stuff, and I met another man and I said to him, I dug a bit of soil and all that, and I said, there's schlig in this ground. We call it schlig. It's pencil gravel. And he said, yes, there's schlig, but it's not like the Orgunala schlig, which is over the hill. The schlig on this side of the hill is infertile. It has nothing. It gives good drainage, but it has nothing virtually to give from a mineral point of view. So I got a lot of knowledge from those people, you know. So it has to be respected. They know. Okay. So what's going to influence your soil health? In a way, I'm going to kind of, okay, I'll just keep going now. So what's going to influence your soil health? What's going to influence it is the structure of your soil. The nutrients that are in your soil or the nutrients that are available. Your fungal bacterial ratio. It has come up several times over the last few days, and I'll explain that very simply. And the ability of the farmer to nurture the soil. It's up there. I could put a lot more stuff, I could put a lot of complex things, but those four things, the structure of the soil, the nutrients, the availability of the nutrients, the fungal bacterial ratio, and the ability of the farmer, male or female, to nurture the soil. That's what will influence the soil health and soil building. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go on with my story a little bit, but I'm going to kind of, so keep all those things in your head, and I'll walk you a little bit through my crops, and I'll show you what I see. Okay? Oh yeah, okay, sorry. I forgot this one. So every action, every amendment that you put on has to be assessed for its addition or subtraction to the story of building the soil. So the status of your compost. So we just saw David and his wife have developed this way of making this type of compost. It's hard to imagine, but if you followed his prescription, which we will do with a lot of trials here, that he claims incredible yields from the status of his compost. Now, I'm an amateur. I'm an amateur in compost making, but I can make some claims in a few minutes around the type of compost and the type of compost that I make. But I'm an amateur. Okay, the method of tillage that you imply, there is no question about it that a steel implement moving through the soil has a major impact on the soil. And whether you're using if you're using an implement with a PTO shaft generally is burning biology faster than one with a tined implement. But the method of tillage you imply, the timing of tillage, the farming that you go about has a huge impact on the quality of your soil. And then, ironically, I put up how we are getting weed strikes. And I put that up now because what's happening now is that some robotic weeders are coming into organics. But I'm speaking about organic, non-organic farmers here. But robotic weeders are coming into organics. And people think that more is better as regards pulling implements, steel implements through the soil in order to get weed strikes. And what you're doing, every time you go through the soil, you're burning biology and you're knocking back the quality of your soil and its ability to perform and its ability to hold on to nutrients. And you're also upsetting the nutrients that are there existing. So you have to be very clear why you're weeding, how you're weeding, and why you're doing it as a farmer. And you know, David spoke a minute ago about, he was talking about no weed strikes, he was talking about mulching. Okay? So now here I am. So the incredible thing is that you can read the soil. So there's a few samples below here in the bottom that Robbie Burns brought in. But what you can do is you can actually train yourself to read your soil. So what you can do is you've got to go about it in a very systematic way, and you go about very slowly. But you can begin to assess your soil for compaction. You can very simply, at your beginning assessment, is that you can actually stick your finger in and assess how easy it is to get your finger into the soil. Then the next thing you can do is you can begin to use a spade, all kinds of things. But basically, you can train yourself to read your soil, and you can read the story around compaction. You can read this. You can train yourself to read the pH of your soil. You can read your soil around your fungal bacterial ratio, those type of things. Now, they can all be done scientifically, and I respect them completely. But you, as a farmer, can actually train yourself to read them from day to day. And there's a lot of people doing this already, reading their soil. It's kind of, it's inert in us. It's there. The old people could do it. They could read it like a map, you know. Okay. So here I am now. So I'm going to kind of read my soil and read different situations a little bit. So this photograph is my Instagram moment. Okay. So I don't have an Instagram account, but it's my Instagram moment. It was taken in 2022. And I'll tell you a little story. So you've all these guys putting up stuff on Instagram, right? And but I don't. And in different, I don't much mess with that stuff. And then different characters tell me, oh yeah, did you see such and such a photograph that such and such a fella had up? And what I very cruelly do is I look to left or right of the perfect photograph, and I see what's going on in the rest of the garden. Or I look at the implement and I read the story that's going on. And then I'll show you a photograph in a moment. And what I do then is I kind of go, oh, they might be in trouble now in a few weeks' time. We'll see how all this pans out. And was that appropriate, that method of tillage at this time, you know? So I can show you what I can say about myself. But this is my Instagram moment. So this is my outside garden, 2 acres. So you've lovely flowers for biodiversity. You've got hay, nice hay saved in the distance, and you have about half an acre of spuds there. And so they're weed-free, organic, no hand weeding, and they're doing well. It was taken around July, I think. Yeah, it was taken in July, maybe early July or so. So a nice photo, okay? So watch this now. Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, okay, that's a good one. Now, who the hell put that big arrow there? That was a not simple IE put that arrow there. So it's the same year, the same garden. You can see the nice buds on the right, can't you? And the big arrow is about there being, highlighting the weeds. It was just 9 drills of spuds, and they're infested with docks, fat hen, and some feverfew. Look at the weeds. Look at the weeds, okay? I actually knew what I was doing. That's my excuse, right? Because I had a guy come to the garden, and he said, oh, this all biological farming, it's easy for you, you're on clean ground. And I thought, the first opportunity I have, I'm going to show you, and I'm going to bring you here and show you about clean ground. So anyhow, was that, yeah. So look at the weeds, okay? So here we are. So the story is, right, so we weren't ready to plant we planted about half an acre plus of potatoes. We weren't ready to plant our potatoes. Our ground wasn't fit in East Clare until the May bank holiday weekend, okay? And if I was telling you my story, so all April came, we got chances of tilling slowly. It was a good enough April, and we weren't ready to plant until the end of April. Okay, on the Friday On the Friday of the bank holiday weekend, we planted the first photograph that I showed to you. So it's the same soil, all that kind of thing, on the Friday of that. And then when it came to 4 o'clock, and the two guys that were with me, when we were planting the potatoes on the Friday, I said to them, okay, we stop now because I need to keep 9 drills. We have 9 bags of spuds left. I need to keep the 9 drills for the boss man. And they all agreed, the 2 workers. The boss man is the guy on the planter with me, who is 6 years old. He's the boss. So we had to keep 9 drills for him for when he'd be off school on the Monday. And it rained all Saturday, it rained all Sunday. And then there was a bit of drying Monday morning, bank holiday Monday. And kind of against my better judgment, I just thought, well, look, he's with us now, Aaron, my grandson. He's with us now, and we'll move on with planting the 9 drills of spuds. So he came anyhow. That's my son driving the tractor. And he came and we had our 9 bags of spuds, and we planted away. And we started enough in nice enough conditions, and then it began to get a bit stickier. It kind of misted a bit, and it got stickier. And the ring around that Kevin has made, the ring is highlighting that as it began to get sticky, the soil was beginning to stick to the steel drive wheel of the planter. Okay? And it was beginning to stick to the steel. So what we were beginning to do, even with all the best compost in the world applied to the garden, nice tillage, all that sort of stuff, the soil in nice condition, reasonably well balanced nutritionally, what we were beginning to do was we were beginning to damage the soil structure. We were damaging the soil structure. We were beginning, you'd have to go down on your hands and knees to see this now, but we were beginning to cap the soil. And when we began to cap the soil, the biology just shut down. It wasn't able for it. And that's what it does. The biology shuts down, the nutrient flow stops happening, the calcium shuts off, it's not available, then the other nutrients can't flow, and as a consequence of that, you get weeds. And you follow on then. Now I go through the potatoes as they emerge, and I go through them and I give them with a tine weeder and I earth them up and all that. And I did all that correctly, but against my best efforts, I had about 3 weed strikes after planting the potatoes, but against my best efforts, the damage I had done was enough to still call the weeds. And the weeds that I called, of course, were docks, a bit of grass, and the old red shank that was there historically. That's what I called by my action. So you'll never ever build, my point is, you'll never build soil when you're damaging it. You'll never build soil biology when you're damaging it with a steeled implement, you know. And as the day went on, the ground wheel began to clog more, and that was a sure sign. I knew I was doing damage, and I thought, look, we'll finish now, what the heck, or something like that. Okay, so let me just go back for 1 minute. So, okay, I'm going to keep going now, but I think I want you to ask me a question in a minute, and I'll ask myself the question in a minute if I don't get the question. I'll just keep going, right? So it's not all bad news. Okay, so it's just a point about building soil health. You've got to protect it, you've got to mind it, you cannot damage the soil. Okay, here's another story. So another story now. So here's the story. So the story is that what happens with growing tomatoes in a greenhouse is that, and we grow on a bed system, it's a 30-inch bed, we plant a single row of tomatoes up along the bed, and what can happen very often, because you have a lot of foot traffic, people traffic, going up and down, training the tomatoes, doing various jobs, what can happen is that you have quite a lot of compaction on the tomato beds, because inevitably people are beginning to walk on the beds, And human compaction can be quite a factor in a market garden. So you begin to have this compaction, and what happens then is that calcium doesn't flow, magnesium isn't available. We begin to supplement feed with these nutrients then, trying to alleviate the problem, okay? And one of the things we start to do as well then is that because the leaves aren't functioning because these deficiencies are throwing in, the leaves begin to not stay green, not to function, not do photosynthesis. So as a consequence of that, very often in horticulture, what we do is we de-leaf the tomato. Now we also de-leaf it to ripen the fruit, to let the sun in, but we de-leaf the tomato. But the interesting thing is, and we had a guy over telling us about this a few years ago, and the interesting thing is that if you pump the biology of the soil and you get the soil functioning, the plant will keep doing photosynthesis. Look at these tomatoes, they're ripening. There's no de-leafing going on because they're getting a sufficient supply of nutrients due to the soil biology. And the other thing that's happening is that the more functioning the soil is, the more even the tomatoes will ripen. So then I'm aware of compaction. I want to build soil under my tomatoes. I don't want a desert when I'm finished growing my tomatoes, okay? And the other thing is that if I go towards a desert under my tomatoes, in my particular ground, in this particular garden, what is there historically for me to come there for me are plants that indicate that the calcium is locked up. So what will come underneath the tomatoes is broadleaf plantain, some sorrel, some silverweed. Not very nice weeds because of the compaction, okay? So what did I do? So it's time now for Leitrim to wear a badge saying, I love the rush. So what I did was I got a bale of rushes. And I spread it out on the bed before I planted the tomatoes. And we planted the tomatoes through the rushes. Or sorry, we put them on after for logistic reasons. But anyhow, we put the rushes under the tomatoes, okay? And what I identified then was that the biology of the soil was not functioning. It was kind of, it was beginning to slow down the functioning of the biology. And what was giving me an indication of that was that there was a few of those kind of obnoxious weeds that I just spoke about beginning to come. So I thought, I have to get this biology functioning. So what I did was I spread out my rushes and I made up a tea. Now, I'm not hung on this particular amendment. I want you to get the concept. But I made up a tea of liquid seaweed and VNS, okay? And I made that up, and I applied that with, I'll tell you, with a watering can. You know, I also had another way of applying it, but keep it simple. I applied it with a watering can. You could actually put it out through drip line irrigation as well. And basically what I did was I applied that onto the rush, and the rush was my absorption material that facilitated what I was putting on to pump the biology. And sometimes, or most of the time, if we have an intermediary between the soil and what we're putting on, we build biology faster. And, you know, various speakers alluded to that, you know, if you're putting it onto a cover crop, you're building biology faster. Here I put it onto rush, and it worked a dream. Now, I experiment a lot, and I could tell you, for instance, that I put it on, one year I put it onto grass clippings, onto lawnmower clippings, And what I did was I increased the N too high, and I ended up with too much of a bacterial aspect in my soil, and I ended up pushing the growth of the tomato too much, and I ended up with a lot of botrytis. So you have to be so that's what I meant by when I said that every action you take, every amendment that you put on, you have to assess it for its NPK, biological status, what it's doing for your biology and your soil. Every single action has to be assessed. And one year I used old silage, and because sometimes when we plant the tomatoes, we have the doors closed at night time. I used old silage as the buffer, and what I didn't know was that silage gives off NO3, the gas. It's laughing gas. And what that does is it shuts down the stomata cells in the tomato plants. So when I came up an hour later after putting on the silage, all the tomatoes had drooped. They had no oxygen. They had no carbon dioxide. They were in excess of NO3. And yeah, I opened the doors, it regulated itself. But you have to assess what you're doing. It's not a random process, this process, okay? So this is one of my little gardens. It's a very tiny little garden, and we grow salads, spinach, and scallions here, usually, and maybe one or two other crops, okay? So I want to tell you one or two things really interesting about this soil. This soil was marginal hillland. This soil was marginal hillland, and it very, very poor topsoil, infested with rushes, and a lot of clay in the soil, okay? And a low pH 4.2, and a very low status on fertility and on biology, actually. Very, very low status. So the transition has been then, if I think about it, over the last 3 years. So first year, a type of a no-dig system using old silage, following the concept of Elaine Ingham. So that was my first transition year. Then I transitioned into a no-dig garden. And I've been in this, and in the second year, and now in the third year, I've transitioned into a kind of a min till. I'm just barely touching the soil with a hand rotavator for a few different reasons. Okay, so the story about this garden is that so what it got following last autumn, was it got a cover crop of cereal rye as a cover crop. All the beds were sown with a cover crop of cereal rye. And then in the springtime, I put on a small amount of compost, of my own compost, onto the beds. And I went on then to grow a succession of crops in these beds. And the succession, I grew, spinach, scallions, and lettuce. Okay, so I sell lettuce salad bags, and this is one of them here. There's 100 grams of salad in this bag. It's one of my main cash crops. And from 13, 15 meter beds, there was the crop I harvested. I harvested 3,000. I have to think about this properly. I harvested 3,100 bags of salad. I harvested 3,100 bags of salad from 13, 15 meter beds. And that was achieved with a minimal amount of compost applied and a cover crop. That was achieved, and then the soil went on to grow spinach and other crops after that. And one of the things about building soil health and about biological farming is that it kind of ticks a lot of boxes around our place as citizens, farmers on the planet and in Ireland. And if you look at this model, the diesel usage was very low. It was hardly a gallon. The inputs were very, very low. And the only irrigation that the garden got was in a dry summer. The only irrigation it got was the crops were watered in after transplanting. So what my point that I'm trying to make is that it's imperative that we build soil health in an environmental context, and we can actually do it as farmers. It's not rocket science. We can actually do it with very, very simple techniques and very simple understandings. And the other thing, to move on slightly from that, is in the whole story of building soil health, where is that garden at now? It's now November 22. Where is that garden at from a soil health point of view and an ecological point of view as well? But from a soil health point of view, where's that garden at now? Where that garden is at now is that when I was finished taking my bags of salad, ironically enough, it's head lettuce variety, and we take off the outer leaves and it replenishes itself, and we get 5, 6, 7 cuts from the one plant. It keeps replenishing itself because the soil is functioning and it has the ability to replenish itself, the plant. The same with the spinach, it keeps replenishing itself. And then what happens then eventually is that the quality goes out of the leaf, and given that it was the autumn time, the leaf is no longer good enough for sale. It's gone a bit tough, it's gone a bit weathered, it's a few other things. But I'm not in the least bit panicked about that. That garden today now is covered, all the beds are covered with kind of mature heads of lettuce and mature spinach plants, okay? And happy days, my soil is covered with a cover crop for the winter, and it's protected for the winter, and the biology is intact. The biology that the soil has built up carefully over the winter is still intact. So why rip it up at this time of the year and expose it? Why not leave it intact, okay? And then bring that story on a little bit. The story then is that these green leaves left now in my soil there, they have a major bacterial feed to give to the soil. They're green matter, they're going to feed the soil in a bacterial way. They're going to tip it excessively bacterial over the winter. So what type of compost do I need to apply in the spring? Once the season opens and we can go now again with compost and whatever, I'm going to say compost, not the other. What do I need to do? I have a few different compost heaps, and I know that one of the compost heaps is slightly fungally dominated, and I will put on a fungally based compost onto the old spinach, and I get that to eat the compost or take the compost and build it into the soil over the spring months, and then eventually I'm going to get ready to put on my next crop. What will my next crop be? This is about building soil. Well, actually it's about making money as well. What's my next crop going to be? My next crop is going to be that the soil now is going to have plenty of N in it. It's going to be functioning very well, and it's still going to be slightly bacterial, which is fine. So what is my crop? My crop of choice is a brassica. The brassica will mop up any of the N that's floating around and keep the soil functioning. If I don't put in a brassica and I don't mop the end, what will happen? The garden will cover over in chickweed. The garden will cover up in chickweed. Now, Sean has seen this garden several times. This garden gets no hand weeding. Every action that I do in this garden is towards building soil health. The crop is incidental. The crop is incidental. Can I go, how are we time was? I'm nearly finished.
We're quite over, but
Oh yeah, okay, sorry.
don't worry.
Okay, so here's a tunnel, right? So I can tell you quite honestly, the concept in organic horticulture is to pull in a sheet of Mypex and cover that tunnel, and then plant through the Mypex. And I did it myself. I did it for years, and I had 90% of the holding covered in Mypex, the horticultural side of the holding in Mypex. And I thought, oh, Jeannie, I'm not a man for pulling in Mypex. So I thought, I got to figure this thing out about this soil health thing. And see, what's happening with the Mypex is that you're burning the biology. You're burning the biology and you're putting the biology to sleep. That's a fact. And how do I know that it's gone to sleep? I know that it's gone to sleep when the soil becomes kind of white, tight, chalk-like. The biology is either dead or it's gone to sleep. And I know also that it's gone to sleep or dead when I begin to have a lot of pests and diseases issues. So if I have a lot of root aphid, it's gone, it's dead, the soil, or it's on the way to being dead. Okay? So the thing is to keep it functioning. And if you look at this tunnel, one of the things is I've got beds, so nobody walks on the soil where the crop is growing. They walk in the paths. No compaction, same beds, same year in, year out. The other thing about this tunnel is, and as is the other tunnels, in the summertime our tunnels tend to be empty. Our tunnels tend, or a good portion of them tend to be empty because we don't make as much money out of them. And we use it for soil building. So our program is we crop in the spring, and then we finish in the tunnel, and at whatever period we have to finish in June, July, we put in a cover crop of choice, select the cover crop carefully, put in a cover crop of choice, and then I let my cover crop grow up, and when it's at a receptive stage for compost, I come into each bed. The bed is 30 meters long by 75 meters wide, and we put on half a wheelbarrow, 2 to 3 buckets of compost on each bed, and that goes on to grow 5 crops after that. That's now that's the power of compost. Is not about NPK, it's about driving soil biology. Okay, I'm aware of NPK, but what we're doing is we're driving soil biology. And it has proved to be so subtle, this concept of applying compost and stimulating the biology, because we don't hand weed. We don't hand weed. We are pushing through the soil. We're pushing through the soil maybe an implement like this every 10 days. And what I'm doing, or a hoe, and what I'm doing is there's thread-like weeds that have germinated, because there'll always be weeds. We're not perfect, or the soil is not perfect. So what I'm doing by pushing that through the soil every 10 days is I'm slightly undercutting the thread of the weed, getting it to wilt, and I'm feeding the biology of the soil. This information is not just from me. This is from all over the world by a lot of people. And I'm building soil by my action with my implement. if the weed is at cotyledon or the weed is at first true leaf stage, it has taken some of the food out of your soil and some of the biology of your soil, and the horse has bolted. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I'm doing is sorry, I lost my train of thought now. So that's my weed control program, but it's not so much weed control as building soil. That's what I'm focused on. And as a result of that, you can see the crops are weed-free, you know. So I think I rest my case. Thank you very much.
Okay, do you want to sit down, Jim? I'm
Yeah.
sure there's a lot of questions for you. Any from the room? Okay, here. So, have we got a mic? We do.
Taking online first,
Okay, we'll take an online first from Dave Kelly. Did you dig in the rushes after the tomato crop or add it to your compost? You just layered it in a kind of a. You didn't dig it in, did you?
No, that's not quite the question he's asking, Suzanne. Okay, so very good question, Dave. So if my soil was functioning to its really top capacity, at the end of the growing season with the tomatoes, there would be none of the mulch left. The biology would have eaten all of the rushes, and that runs through all cover crop, all mulches. So I put on, my biology was not at 100, we'll say, so I had a small amount of rush left. I gathered that up very carefully and I brought it over and put it on the compost.
Okay.
Because what was I doing? I was bringing the biology from the polytunnel and putting it into the compost heap.
Okay. From Claire, any tips on mulching materials at the start of growing season for leafy green crops?
Any tips? Oh yeah, so that's very difficult, Claire. That's very difficult, Claire, because what can happen is that when you put a mulch on to leafy green crops, you can upset the fungal bacterial ratio. And what can happen is that the soil gets kind of lazy, goes to sleep, and it becomes slightly too bacterial. And what happens when it becomes slightly bacterial then is that all the slugs in your particular area will eat your leafy green crops.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's very important.
Okay, good point. We have a question from the floor.
Yeah, it's just about applying your methodology to a farm situation rather than a horticultural situation. I grow about 50 acres of cereals every year organically.
Yeah.
I grow a cover crop after the cereal crop, say I sow it in August.
Yeah.
I then put store lambs down to graze over the winter. I then come along and I plough that, of course, and I put in a cereal crop. Now, when I put in the cereal crop in March, April, or whatever, I close the gate and I don't touch it until the following harvest, till I harvest it. So I'm wondering, you were saying you use the hand tool for disturbing the. I have a comb harrow. It's about 12 meters wide, but I haven't actually used it. I bought it about 4 years ago. So you were suggesting that I should go in with that comb harrow every week or so after the cereal crop appears or comes up. Would you be suggesting that? And the other thing, when I'm talking about the organic matter, I can never seem to get enough organic matter. I keep about 100 animals, and I use the FYM from them, but it only covers maybe, I don't know, 20, 30 acres, half the area that I'd like to cover. So, you know, do you spread it more thinly over the whole area, or is there an optimum rate per acre, if you know what I mean? I know it's difficult in the organic or in the horticulture situation where you're talking much smaller areas.
Okay, so the thing is that what the concept around, we'll call it biological farming. The concept is that you improve the quality of your organic material that you're making compost from. and that you bring it up to a state where it's a biological feed for the soil. And that really carries then over many acres. And if I put that in a context now of just still the horticulture, it wouldn't be uncommon, we'll say, in one of those beds in the polytunnel, it wouldn't be uncommon to put in 10 or 12 wheelbarrows of farmyard manure per crop every time. And I've done it myself. That was my practice for years. I'd wheel 10 or 12 wheelbarrows and put it in. And suddenly I discovered, well, the hard way, that if I grow my cover crop and I feed my cover crop with half a wheelbarrow of this quality compost, it has a better effect.
Next question, you have this gentleman here, yeah.
Thanks very much, Jim. Very interesting talk. I have a question there, two questions, and one to go back to your use of putting down reeds. And I was just going to ask, would it be safer to process those rushes outside, and when they're more fully broken down, to bring them in to be able to better control any element of fungal production which could spore into the polytunnel? And then the second question I have is, you didn't mention any element of use of crop rotation. So is that an aspect of what you would be doing, or have you actually, I've heard recently some people are doing less of that because they've used a more permacultural method. So thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you. So the rushes, to be clear about the rushes were cut and saved like hay the previous year. So there were round bales of rushes that were hay-like, that would have gone for bedding over the winter. That's the quality of the rush that I was bringing in to the tunnel to put under the tomatoes.
So they were nice and dry.
They were nice and dry. They were dry.
Yeah.
They were hay-like.
Yeah.
And they covered the ground. They stopped the ground from drying out. They gave a buffer against the compaction from the human being, and also then they were this kind of medium for me to put on my two feeds, we'll call them, and that's what they were, the rush.
And what was your second question again? It was
around rotation.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so I'll tell you, if you came home with me, I've 8 different gardens and 8 different things going on in my head, okay, and from all these different, like studying these different ideas. So basically, so what I respect crop rotation, and I will respect it for a very long time until I'm a good enough farmer to dispense with it. Okay, so that's my first point. My second point is that in an area, I've a few different areas where I have kind of mixed up gardens, multi plantings, no dig gardens, no rotation whatsoever, and I've been doing that for a few years in the same plots, and it would blow you over as regards the health of the soil, the health of the plants, the health of everything. And like one of my nice textbook rotation gardens and all of that type of thing is throwing up this sulfur deficiency, which manifests itself as ring spot in brassicas. And I have exactly the same plants at home in the no-dig garden, and there's not a trace of ring spot. So there's no sulfur issues at home. But you've got to respect it, and you got to, it's a bit like with David earlier on, as he said, you've got to follow the detail. This is science. This isn't kind of voodoo stuff, you know? Yeah.
Okay, there's a question in from online viewer Jennifer. If an organic farmer has land that is magnesium and boron deficient, how would she or he restore the soil to eliminate these deficiencies?
Okay, so the first thing is that we'll say the quick answer to get you out of jail, Jennifer, is to apply magnesium, to apply Epsom salts and to apply boron, which is both allowed organically. And it's way more efficient to put it onto a living cover crop than to put it onto the bare soil. And that's your kind of get out of jail clause. And then it's absolutely true for what Elaine Ingham was saying yesterday, that when you bring up the organic matter content and you bring up the soil biology, these minor nutrients will look after themselves.
Okay. Next question, what is your preferred method of tilling? I've heard you mention workhorses. Yes, you're a big workhorse fan. Do you ever still use them?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
For sure.
Why are they good on ground? You'd expect it to be heavy and poach it, no?
No, so it's really interesting. So 2 acre garden, so a plot with workhorses working, a plot with a David Brown 780 tractor working, and a plot with a 65 horsepower New Holland 4-wheel drive tractor. So 3 different types. It would shock you the level of compaction that the 65 horsepower tractor is doing in comparison to the workhorses. There is 0 compaction with workhorses.
But even every footfall must have a terrible compaction beneath it, and there's a lot of footfalls going up the road.
Can I demonstrate something to you? When you're going through soft ground, you make yourself nimble. The workhorse does the same thing.
Okay.
It lightens its load. It
That's
doesn't.
interesting.
Whereas the metal is a dead weight. The workhorse kind of does what a human does, even better.
Okay. Another one. Hi, Jim. I have problems with wood lice and flea beetles. How would you recommend I discourage them?
Okay. So flea beetle it comes that when the soil has very poor structure, and the soil has opened out. The soil has opened out, and the organic matter content is poor. And if you bring organic matter content and structure into your soil, the flea beetle, what happens is that the cells of the brassica are succulent, and they cannot suck into succulent leaves. So they will be outside the door of the kennel, but if you have chocolate cake soil inside, they will not come in.
Okay.
Will I just mention about lice?
Yeah.
Yes, sorry.
So wood lice very often comes from people that are using raised beds, and their place to live and their place to go to is the decaying wood.
At the edge.
Yeah, that's where wood lice come from.
Okay. Last question. I think we'll wrap it up after this. Last year, Jim, you were talking about foliar spraying nutrients to plants, squashes, etc., in your polytunnel. Have you had any measurable results with this experiment?
What could I say? Could I say? So I have no measurable results.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. I didn't do any harm, and I suppose I'm very kind of interested. I'm very just today now. I'm very interested in liquid seaweed and in what was the other one I mentioned? Begins with V. No. So I'm very interested in that, but I can see, yeah. So yeah, VNS.
I have no idea what
VNS. VNS is a byproduct of the sugar beet industry, and it's got an NPK status, but it also has the ability to drive. It's got sugar, and sugars drive soil biology.
Okay. Very last question. We promised this is the last one. Where would I go to if I wanted to learn from Jim? Perhaps there's a course I could do. Well,
NOTS.
it just happens.
That's on our website, nots.ie, that you can line up for the organic marketing course. Who the hell was that Kevin guy? I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, that was subversive.
Yeah.
Listen, Jim, thanks a million for talking to us. There's so much there. We could go back over and it touches on everything that we've heard from the other speakers so far. So thank you for everybody in attendance. It's been a long day. I know we ran over, and thanks for all our online listeners and watchers and for all your contributions, and a fantastic day again, and roll on day 3 tomorrow. So thanks to all our contributors, and thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Back tomorrow at 1 p.m.
Thanks very much, Suzanne. Moving on to a new host tomorrow. So thanks very much, Suzanne.